Good morning, everyone, and we're very happy to have you here. We are almost 12 minutes down, but we believe that we'll be able to make it. Today, we are having this section on From Assets to Flow, Unlocking Climate Finance for African Sustainable Economic Growth Projects. And we are very pleased to have here His Excellency Dr. Amani Abu Zaid, Commissioner of Infrastructure and Energy, and at the AUC. I want us with a warm welcome and applause. Just invite as she comes to take her seat And then we also have Mr. Nassim Wamani, the Acting Director, Technology, Climate Change, and Natural Resource and Management Division at UN ECA. And then we have my own prof, Professor Anthony Young, who is the Director of Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. So before Dr. Amani comes, we are gathered here because we want to change the narratives. It used to be that we always say there are a lot of developers looking for money, but they could not find investors. And then there are investors also looking for bankable projects, but could not find the developers. And we bring out measures which turns out to be more like a talk shop. But the climate champions with UNECA and BCG took a different approach to change the narrative. And today the narrative is, what are the measures, what are the de-risking solutions, what are the things that we need to do in order to get these pipeline of projects that have been originated. And we are hoping that in 5 years' time, we will elevate it to a higher level from the talk shop to practicality to impact, where we will be saying that we've been able to put developers in touch with investors, and we've been able to raise social amount, millions of investment for these projects with these number of beneficiaries, with this climate impact and this achievement. And when we do that, then we've really put our foot on where our mouth is, walking the talk. And this is the beginning. So we're going to hear from Dr. Amani, who is going to give us the opening keynote remarks. And with pleasure, Dr. Amani, the podium is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by welcoming you all to this important event. And as my brother just said, this is the time where we need to talk together and to find a way together on how to make sure that we implement all the fantastic projects that we have also again together that we have developed. And when we talk about climate finance and projects in Africa, you would all recall, because many of you were with us on the journey when we were developing the pipeline of regional projects in our program for infrastructure development, PIDA. You would all recall that one of the main criteria that we have insisted upon in selecting those projects was climate resilience and climate friendliness. So now we are at the time where we need to go further especially in terms of finance, of investment, of implementation, and not just of project development. And I'm really happy also to see, apart from the African Union Program for Infrastructure Development, that there is a new generation of climate resilient and smart infrastructure projects that are being developed across Africa to adapt and to mitigate to increasing impact of climate change. You are not also without knowing that we in Africa, we need between 7 to 15 billion dollars every year to adapt to the impacts of climate change. This is a fantastic opportunity for investment. And I'm saying this, I mean, there are always two ways of seeing the gap, whether you want to see it as really a deficit and a gap, or also as an opportunity for investment. And I think this is how we should be looking at it. This is a fantastic opportunity for investment. And we also know that our public budgets have been doing a great job over the years, but they're not enough. And when we talk about the private sector or the non-public or non-sovereign funds into the projects, it's not just about the investments itself. We want the know-how, the expertise, the technology transfer, the skilling, upskilling of our people, a different way of thinking, and this dynamism is often brought up by non-public players or other stakeholders, and that's really the way we should be looking at the work and the partnership with the private sector, what they can bring into the infrastructure landscape and into climate resilient infrastructure. For us to be able to attract the private sector, it's not just a matter of finance or investment policies. There is much more to be done, and I'm saying this in all openness as well. Because there are things to be said about governance. There are things to be said also about the different reforms that we are carrying out in our programs or in our countries. There is also issues of cutting the red tapes and transparency. These are things, critical aspects to which the private sector often look, and we need to make sure that when we talk about private sector investment or attracting private sector, that these are elements that we are looking into, and I'm sure those of you, whether from the AU or of representing the funds or commercial banks or others, I mean, I'm sure that you're going to touch upon these elements to let us know also what is it that you are looking for when you identify or when you want to invest in projects, particularly infrastructure projects in Africa. The projects that we at the African Union are championing, you all know that they are regional by nature, meaning there is more than one country involved in these projects. And adding to the technical complexities, it's also the regulation complexities, the policies complexities. And our work at the AU consists also of harmonizing the policies, the regulations, so that to enable or to facilitate the job of finance of these or investment in these projects. We also are developing and have been actually developing several tools in order to prepare the projects, knowing, how technical studies that are needed at the beginning, how costly they are. So in the past and still ongoing, we had together with the AUDA-NEPAD and ADB having the infrastructure preparation facility, which is a grant, to start the preparation of these projects. Again, and we have an interesting pipeline in that regard to help investors, But also I'm very, very happy and proud that only 2 days ago, through the AGIA, the African Green Infrastructure Facility or Alliance, African Development Bank, Africa 50, African Union, together with the Rockefeller Foundation, and then many multilateral banks, we were able to raise $170 million for a new facility, a new alliance that we launched already in COP27 in order to prepare green infrastructure for investment. And our aim is to grow to 500 million very soon, and I'm confident that we'll grow into 500 million very soon. And why not, grow beyond? So that's the start. And that happened only two days ago in front of all of you. The pledges happened. So this is really a time of change, which by definition is an exciting time. So I would like us to really grab this opportunity and benefit from the momentum that is being created around the world for climate resilience infrastructure, and especially in Africa, and to find ways together. And I do not wish to continue seeing public and private. We are all in this together, whether Africans or not. Our aim is to really work together to address the climate challenges. So I hope that in this session we will also look and talk about things like how can we promote green infrastructure projects more, and what kind of ESG the private sector would want and has to integrate into these infrastructure projects. We want to see also about the future in smart digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, how they get into these projects, how do we promote them, how regional projects and transcontinental projects, how do we make them more palatable for all investors to tap into in terms of and partner with us on those for investment. So there are questions, but they are critical for us to address and to hear and learn from each other on the different point of views. Again, I welcome you all to this session, and I'm excited to hear from you and listen to you on your contribution, your input, your way of thinking on how to address and how to implement these projects fastest. I cannot do that without our African family, and the African families, the African Union, the African Development Bank, and of course the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. But all of us, as I always say, all of us are the African Union. So thank you all, and I look forward for an exciting session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Dr. Mani. And this testify that we are on the right track, and we need to keep the momentum going. And we believe that we're going to see results. We need also to coordinate with other initiatives that are going on. And I see Anna's here, who may also be talking to us a little bit more about the AGIA and then also the $170 million that Dr. Mani intimated on. So now we're going to move to other partners in this. We have UNECA here, and I'm going to ask both Mr. Nassim Wamani and Professor Anthony Young to just let us know from the experience of AFDB and UNECA, what are the opportunities that you see around climate change for these projects? And then also, what do we need to do in order to translate from the assets that we have to flow of funds? So we go first to Mr. Omani, and then Professor Young will follow.
Thank you, Chair, Excellency, Madam Commissioner, Professor, honorable delegates, friends, guests. So indeed, as the Commissioner has highlighted, I mean, the continent is plenty of opportunities, but we have an issue. I mean, we cannot move from these opportunities, or not enough. We cannot move enough from these opportunities to real concrete projects that are really supporting our transformation, the transformation of the continent, and beyond. I mean, beyond beyond the resources, we really, at the global level, need to, everybody need to understand that Africa has a double challenge beyond the climate one. I mean, the development one is really also the priority of the continent. So the challenge is how to use the climate challenge to support the development challenge, and how to use the development challenge to respond to this climate challenge. So, and for that, it's really important to explore the different levers, and to use different levers. Of course, it's very important to have this big project the Commissioner was talking about, the PIDA project. These are structuring, these are key for our continent, because without that we're not able to implement to achieve the transformation that is needed to respond to these challenges. When it comes to climate change in Nairobi during the last Africa climate conference in September, then the African narrative has changed. The African leaders very clearly, they have affirmed their willingness to make Africa as a pillar of the response, of the global response to the climate challenge. And this is not just an affirmation. This is based on our what we have across the continent in terms of resources. The natural capital is huge, and Africa really could contribute more than at the periphery, but really as a central contributor to this challenge. So now, how we can bring the finance to this opportunity, and what has been started with the last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, with this pipeline, with also the support of BCG, thanks to BCG for the tremendous work they are doing in support to all the partners that are involved in this pipeline, is really to demonstrate, to show that there are projects, there are ideas, there are tremendous, there are people behind these projects that are ready and that are already doing things, maybe not at the right scale, but they need this finance to really accelerate what they are doing, and having it at a scale where you have a climate impact. So, but for that you need to, because there is a perception that the projects in Africa are not really bankable. The environment, the ecosystem is not really supportive, etc. But it's only by doing the things that we demonstrate that things could move quickly, and beyond that, innovation. And the Commissioner also was speaking about the importance of technology here, bringing all the means, linking the different levers to really accelerate and demonstrate that what is. So there are other levers that we need to mobilize, but this one is very important, because this one give the proof of concept, demonstrate that it's working, and beyond that, it gives the hope to all the actors that have ideas, that have a project, the young women that across the continent that have concrete projects, and this will give them the demonstration that we can move very quickly. And thanks again for all the partners that are involved in this projects to help us to move quickly. I will stop here for a moment.
Thank you. Honorable Commissioner, nice meeting you again. By the way, she's an AFDB ambassador. Thank you very much. And thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity to share from my heart exactly what I think I've seen in the past 22 years in development. In September, like my brother said, the African leaders met in September in Nairobi and came up with a call to action. And one of those was the reforming of the the multilateral financial institutions. That's very important. So when you think of an institution that is very complex, that does not mobilize resources at scale, what we need and what we have don't match at all. And then thirdly, that institution is so difficult to access, and the resources don't go to where they need it most. It goes to those who have the capacity to develop certain projects and so on. When you add that to a terrible narrative we have created for ourselves, when you pick anything on climate change in Africa, the first thing you see is we are the most vulnerable, we are the riskiest, we are the worst impacted. You name all those things. There's absolutely no way the private sector would take. Those are not indices the private sector loves. So you do your projects and keep them there. Because all they see is the risk, the vulnerability, the hazard, name them, and so on. And let me give you some numbers. Private sector share of climate finance, Central Asia and Eastern Europe, 39%. South Asia, 36%. Latin America and Caribbean, 49%. Africa, 14%. You will then understand why we need to step up our efforts. The commissioner talked about PIDA. Excellent, wonderful projects. But who is taking these projects up to invest them? So it's not as if there aren't those projects you've talked about, Tim. Those projects are there. But we need first, in my opinion, we need to be able to change that narrative. And we find ourselves, we've tried several things. At the African Development Bank, we hosted the Secretariat of the Sustainable Energy for All, SC for All. And we produced prospectus of potential projects signed off by the ministers of energy. Every of those prospectus. But when it came to those countries coming to the bank to request funding for projects, not a single project from those prospectuses were submitted. But they signed off on them. They assented to those projects. They said, these are the things we want, just like the PIDAC. But when it comes to a country now coming to the bank to say we want to do an energy project, none of those energy projects came from the prospectus. So we stopped and said, we need government and African institutions to own the narrative, to own their development. When we divide projects into this is what external funders should do, and this is what we can do. So anything that has resilience, climate, and so on, we think is for others. This is a core part of our development. We cannot afford to leave it in the hands of outsiders of the continent. So it's something we need to deal with ourselves. And what have we done? At the African Development Bank, every of our projects have to indicate how they align with the long-term strategies of countries. Very easy to do that for mitigation because we know what it is, CO2. You can measure it, you can plot a graph. But when it comes to the heart of Africa, which is resilience and adaptation, that becomes a bit tricky. And at COP26, we had partners that said we want to double our adaptation finance pledges by 2025. By last year, COP27, what we're being told is, where are the projects? We can't find the adaptation projects. Mitigation projects are all over. And we said, We've heard this story several times. So we now decided to develop what we call the Country Climate Adaptation Compact. That says it's easy to identify mitigation projects, but adaptation projects are a bit more difficult. How do you translate the long-term strategies that are in the stratosphere to the NDCs that are in the atmosphere to investable projects that people can see? We've done that for 8 countries. We're doing for 7 more countries, thanks to our collaboration with the Boston Consulting Group, who is working with us on this. But the idea we're trying this time is that these projects are led by the ministries of finance, supported by the ministries of environment, because we see where these things work. If the finance ministries can say, yes, this is important to us, it will be part of our economic planning pillar and so on, we believe the chance of it being implemented is higher than if we left it to a shopping list of potential projects. So with these projects you have, Tim, I think we need to see how do we get the private sector in. And getting the private sector in means we need to work with the governments to see how they can incentivize this. For us, what we've heard of is risk. So we've created a risk guarantee facility, $2 billion, and said, Africa is not risky. We know it. The president of the bank talked the other day that when Moody's did an assessment of defaulting nations, Africa had 0.0% default. So we've put $2 billion on the table and said, if this country defaults, take it. I think that's how far we can go to prove that the perceived risks are just wear out compared to the real risks that we have on the continent. And we need to help ourselves by telling a better narrative of our story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Young. And I think the challenge that you gave to us about bringing in the private sector in order to also catalyze private sector financing is what we're going to segue now. We're going to hear from private sector companies that are here. And I want to invite Jacinda Njike, who is going to moderate the next section, where we're going to have these private sector companies showcase some of the projects that they are working on. So, Jacinda. Thank you, yes. So we transition into the, thank you very much.
So if I can invite our stellar colleagues, Philippa and Sagarika, to join us on the stage for this part of the session. Apologies for my voice, but we clearly have been having too much fun at COP28. So as we've discussed, this session is focused on unlocking the climate finance and making sure that projects and financiers meet each other where they need to be in order to unlock that finance. We, together, the Climate Champions team with UNECA, AU, and BCG, have really done a lot of work over the past 18 months to identify the main blocking points and to really address those head on. Out of this collaborative work, not only have we come up with this project compendium, but out of this has come the African Carbon Markets Initiative, which looks at specifically how carbon markets can be accessed and grown throughout the African continent. We've also looked at NDSI, which is the Nairobi Declaration for Sustainable Insurance, to understand how we can continue to de-risk the African climate projects. So there's a lot of work that's been going on around this complete ecosystem in order to, because we do understand that it's not one, it's and that's going to allow us to get to where we want to go. And so with that, I just want to introduce Sagarika, who will discuss a little bit more about what we've done together over these last 18 months.
Brilliant, great. Is this on? Great, really lovely to be here. For me, being at this pavilion with you is just such a highlight of COP. I know everyone's had a difficult time getting in, but we have made it to our first session. So what I did want to say is that our story with the Africa Climate Projects started in Addis, kindly hosted by UNECA in August 2022, where the Champions Finance team with our Champions Africa team hosted a few sessions. And we use these to start curating a list of projects. And from this, in 2023, we went to Abidjan and to Nairobi. We held more sessions with project owners and with financiers. And what you're going to hear about today is some really high-quality, fantastic projects. So later you'll hear from SolarX in West Africa, Ampersand in East Africa, and Sistema Bio. Now, there are a number of projects that we initially curated in 2022 that it's not that we haven't taken them forward, but we haven't spent as much time matchmaking them with financiers. Now, all of the projects that we identified are all good quality projects, but the fact is today, some of the projects, they need more time, they need more technical assistance, they need more work before they're ready for the financiers. And so that's something that we mustn't lose sight of when we just look at the ones that we're profiling today. Many, many more opportunities. We're very grateful for our collaboration with BCG Africa, their Lagos and their Nairobi teams have been very helpful. We're also grateful actually to HSBC, who don't have a strong presence in Africa, but they seconded one of their top investment bankers, Mazen Swaydan, who's here in the audience today. You can spot him a mile off. Look how well dressed this man is. So we were graced with the real expertise of a a guy who's worked in investment banking for 20 years, and his fantastic connections as well. And then obviously also grateful to GFANZ Africa, Tim, and to the Green Climate Fund, who gave us some support in connecting us to their narrative and their work. So I do want to quickly mention that yesterday we launched a report. It's called Regional Platforms for Climate Projects. In this, you'll find a bit about our story, but more importantly, you'll find the shortlists of the projects for 2023. And that includes a number of opportunities. It covers 5 regions, including Africa, and it'll give you a bit of a sense of what we've been trying to do in the opportunity set. I'm going to pass now to Philippa, who's going to take us a little bit more into the approach that was used, and then you are going to hear from our project owners.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Sagarika, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 18 months. We started this effort with the idea of aggregating projects across the world, and we built a pipeline of 400+ projects cutting across multiple industries, thematic areas, and across mitigation and adaptation. Fantastic effort, really showing and demonstrating that there is potential to invest in this space. It's an opportunity, an $80 billion opportunity to invest, and we're very sort of excited about the potential for what it can do for the environment. But really, as we started to evolve the thinking, we decided to push even further to see how we could better support the projects. Can we move on to the next slide? Sorry. Can we start again? Can we move to the previous slide? So BCG supported the UN high-level champions to provide advanced visibility and support to those projects, really thinking about how do we take this idea of aggregation even further than what we do today, and start to really build up these projects to engage with investors in a more meaningful way. For Africa specifically, it was 200+ projects on the next slide, cut across majority of the continent. Those 200 projects represent a $10 billion investment opportunity. Those 200 projects were shortlisted to 16 projects, representing a $10 billion opportunity. The reason why we decided to shortlist was because we couldn't focus on all 200 projects at the same time, because we recognize that these projects need advance focus support if they're going to achieve any sort of meaningful progress from the engagement with investors. If we move on to the next slide, what exactly did we do for these projects? We did 3 things with the projects. The first thing we did was work with them on one-on-one investor matchmaking. And what does this mean? Well, when you look at projects today, a number of them sort of cut across different industries, different sectors, different topics and thematic areas. But the challenge with that is, in a very sort of fragmented industry where you have different types of investors, the opportunity set is quite varied. And actually, what we found working with project stakeholders is that they spend a lot of time trying to figure out the right sort of investors to engage with. We were able to cut down that time by really establishing the right sort of investor network that they should be engaging with. And what we heard was that this is quite valuable. The second thing that we did was really around this topic of visibility, right? Because a number of these projects are quite small and they're sort of fragmented and spread across the continent. How do we bring the right level of attention to the great work they're doing, showcase the efforts they're doing in a compelling way? And this was highlighted across different opportunities, targeted events, regional events, and forums, working and leveraging the convening power of the UN high-level champions. We first started in June with the roundtable events that exposed a selection of our projects to over 30-plus investor organizations. And then we followed that effort up in September with some engagements, first with the Africa Climate Summit, bringing some of our really exciting projects to the forefront there. And then there was a fantastic collaboration as well with the Green Climate Fund, where we took 4 projects and showcased them to over 300 participants. The other thing that was quite useful was also preparing those projects to engage with those investors in a meaningful way. So what does that mean? A number of the projects that we worked with required some support with pitch preparation, investor navigation, and what we heard directly from the investors that they engaged with was these projects were able actually to come to us in a more better prepared for the conversations, and we've been able to cut down that investor engagement cycle quite significantly. If we move on to the next slide, please. So what has been the impact of this work? I mentioned before it's a $10 billion investment opportunity. Well, we've been able to, in a very sort of short time frame, raise about $300 million from these deals. It's a starting point. And as you know, the investor interactions take a little bit of time to build up momentum, but we feel very affirmed in the work that we've done and then the potential for more impact with more targeted support. But the money that's been raised is going to touch across multiple areas. We're very excited about the potential in energy. There's also potential to also impact agriculture and eco-restoration as well. So this is super exciting. But don't just hear it from us. We're going to hear directly from some of the projects that we've also been able to support as part of this work. Thank you.
And so with that, if we can invite our project developers up to the stage. Uh-oh, what happened? Okay, we lost the presentation. Okay, voila, we're back. So we're lucky here to have Joshua Lay. I think we have, okay, perfect. So as we mentioned, we had a project pipeline of over 450 projects. And we have to be honest, part of the issue that we had was providing data and relevant information for the investors. So the projects that were able to progress the fastest were the ones where the project developers were able to work with us to provide the data and to provide the information necessary to engage with the investors. And so these young men are stellar examples of people who were able to work with us and provide the information that the investors needed in order to really achieve our long-term goals. So with that, I will turn it over. I guess we can start with SolarX and our founder and CEO, Karim Gamashi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to BCG, to the team for organizing this. I think it's quite relevant. We are a pure example of what was explained earlier, is that we started as a seed commercial and industrial solar energy company based out of Mali. And in the last 2 years, we raised more than $20 million. Can you hear me now? Voila. So with a fund called E3 Capital, and then FMO, and then Proparco. And now we're heading for Series B. So actually what we do is we go to the private sector, manufacturing, banks, data centers, mining, cement plants. We install power generation systems, solar, it can be batteries, it can be other systems. We install also monitoring, digitalization, so they start to understand how they consume energy, so we go for energy savings, and we finance all of that. So we put a CapEx problem into an OpEx one, and then they can afford to go for decarbonization, and sometimes we can reach almost 50% decarbonization on these assets. Right? And we give them their long-term contracts, maybe sometimes 10 years, sometimes 15 years. So they are really incentivized, they make savings, and at the same time they capitalize on that. So, voila, it's thanks to this money that was available, we are a pure proof that you can find the funds, that you can actually deploy assets. And today we are looking for a Series B, so we're looking for more partners to continue these ventures. We are based in, today we have an office in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. We are based in Senegal. We're going to Cameroon. We have Burkina Faso also. We work with prime clients, telecommunication companies. We deployed assets for the United Nations, actually. We did some project in Gao. Voila, quite a good experience, and very happy for this. I'm happy to be here.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for making it in so early. My name's Josh Whale. I'm the CEO at Ampersand. I'm here to tell you, I'll give you another example of why His Excellency COP President Sultan Al Jaber is wrong about the future of oil and gas. We have already designed, built, and deployed fleets of smart batteries for EVs in Africa. We operate in Rwanda and Kenya. We serve electric motorcycles. These motorcycles operate across the continent. The vehicles we replace operate across the continent. Petrol motorcycles make up 20% of fuel consumption across the continent. They make up 50% of road traffic in most of sub-Saharan Africa. Just stand by the side of the road in Kigali or Nairobi and you'll see what I mean. They make up about, with the serviceable addressable market that we can already serve today, spends $13.2 billion a year on fuel. The motorcycles that we've deployed cost 9% less to acquire up front and 35% less to power and operate. So we already have a mass market electric vehicle that simply costs less to buy and operate from day one. Not in California, not in China, but in Africa. And at just 1,300 vehicles earlier this year in Kigali, we hit 36% gross margin already. Compare that to gross margins on fuel sales, and you'll see what I mean about Sultan Al Jaber. Currently, there's also a very highly reliable battery, which is key for this commercial market. We serve, the customers we serve are taxi and delivery riders, not private users. Our batteries will run about 25,000 kilometers between roadside assistance. So that's far more reliable than any internal combustion engine and leaves all the competition in the dust. So I think what I also hope to represent today for the wider world is the opportunity that that businesses like ours and my colleagues here on the stage represent, and the value for money that we can deliver to the world here at COP. For example, for just 1/4 of 1 year's spend, that $13.2 billion a year total spend, for 1/4 of that, we can electrify every single motorcycle in sub-Saharan Africa. I think it also just illustrates why it's absurd that only 3% of climate capital deployed globally has gone to the continent. That's a figure that Kawisafi Ventures just posted. Just 3%. So please, yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning. This is Alex Eaton, and I'm presenting Sistema Bio. I'm the CEO and co-founder. And what we do is help smallholder farmers use their resources more efficiently. We produce a technology start to finish. We manufacture, sell, deploy, install, and service over the long term piece of infrastructure that allows farmers to turn all of their manure into clean energy. So a cooking gas or a fuel that can be used in energy production like engines or generators. And the byproduct of that is a high quality agricultural input that we use for regenerative agriculture, allows them to displace chemical fertilizers, and allows us to train farmers how to use syntropic and agroforestry practices to increase the soil carbon content on their farms. So the net result here is a really good investment for farmers. The challenge has been that the upfront cost is quite high. So we've solved that over the years by providing farmers with a payment plan, but that still leaves us serving a smaller sliver of the population. We've been doing this for about 15 years, and after 12 years, all of the systems that we installed in 12 years, we repeated that this year with 12 months because we were able to bring in carbon financing. And what that allows us to do is basically give farmers a huge discount on the technology upfront as a loan against using the technology for 10 years. And that represents a forward payment on their carbon outcomes that they're generating with their efforts and their technology. So we figured out a way that we can make sure that the carbon markets are transparent, fund the people that are doing the work. And just a quick note on our technology, we destroy methane. So that's immediately additional, and it's a permanent solution. So you don't have any of the issues around scenario mapping or permanence. As soon as you destroy methane and avoid CO2 being emitted, it is a carbon credit that of the highest value, and we've taken a very high integrity and transparency approach to that. So far we've raised about $30 million. That's allowed us to build manufacturing capacities, serve about 100,000 farmers in 30 countries. Right now we're raising an additional $50 million that will be a working capital fund that allows us to pre-finance the carbon to farmers and bring that carbon to market. So we're growing extremely fast, and we have a huge impact at the cross-section of ag and energy, and we'd welcome further conversations. Thank you.
So I just want to ask one last question of our project developers. What do you think the value of participating in this particular project compendium has been for you? And there's a mic just there.
Hello. The value, of course, is exposure. This is one. And secondly, these companies always need funds. We are growing, we're growing our assets. So as big as we become, we're still doing new things. So definitely, it's meeting with new investors, inviting these investors to understand what we do, not just saying that we're doing it in a sustainable way, but we also do it in a profitable way. So we're here to make money, and we let also our clients get an outcome out of it and make money out of it. So these are bankable projects. These are reliable projects. They are sustainable, yes, but they are also profitable.
You want to pass that? Thank you.
Sorry. Look, I think it helps to grow that 3%. I hope that it gets out to those climate tech investors that wouldn't normally consider Africa and gives them a simple digestible overview of the types of reasons why they should allocate time and ultimately financial resources to the continent. I think it also presents, I hope that it creates here at the COP negotiations and at the global level a paradigm shift, that rather than the funds that Africa is calling for being seen as a sink for money, but rather seeing as a viable and commercially viable investment that can deliver an attractive commercial return.
I'd agree with all that. The carbon markets are fundamentally one that are based on trust. It's a political market where we really do need everybody to be all in. We really can't have naysayers, we can't have people sitting on the sidelines, and it requires groups like BCG and others that are coming together and putting hard data around the returns, showing the potential for companies like ours. I think precisely changing the paradigm from donations or aid to viable investments, and I think precisely shifting and positioning the continent as probably one of the best investments when it comes to climate tech, because you fundamentally have the political responsibility the lowest in terms of climate change, but you have the opportunity in terms of land and population growth and changing scenarios, that's the highest. So I think it's a really exciting time to position companies in this geography in this way.
One more closing word?
No, yeah, we can add to that, you know, you come from something that is virgin, so we can create literally a nice carbon segment, right? So it's not like in Europe or in the US or other markets where you have to convert. Here we're going almost from scratch. And that's the difference. This is where we have a real opportunity. The only one that I can relate to is what happened with telecommunication 20 years ago, the GSM, when it arrived in Africa. That's the kind of wave that hit the continent. And today, on the carbon side, on the energy side, that's the same wave that is coming, if not bigger. So it's a real opportunity for investors. Now it's finding the right companies, how to do it in a commercial and viable way to succeed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your hard work and your working with the climate champions and our partners to move these projects forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Collaborate with you. So next, I would like to call our fireside chat panelists. If Mrs. Alaranti Doherty would join us, please. Ms. Dr. Dalia Abdelkader, Ms. Annika Brouwer, Mr. Aminu Umar Sadiq from the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, and finally, Mr. Anas Sharafi from Africa 50. And I will become a Bokolo in a window for this morning, as she had a conflict and unfortunately won't be able to join us today. So we have just heard from our project developers from their perspective how a compendium and project and alignment and collaboration can help support them and create the initiatives that they are looking forward to. Now we have these experts from the various investment authorities, and we would like to hear from you how this type of compendium is working towards unlocking climate finance. And what are the key initiatives or interventions that you at your organizations are aiming at promoting sustainable climate finance? Maybe I can just start on this side with Mr. Aminu.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. A real pleasure being here. So there are a number of initiatives that the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority is currently championing as it relates to sustainability and climate, and I'll touch upon a couple of them. I think the first is, you may have seen, about 5 years ago in Nigeria, we led an initiative called InfraCredit, which is essentially a guarantor, a financial guarantor that seeks to mobilize domestic local currency financing into domestic infrastructure financing. And what we sought to do over the last year and a half, working with like-minded partners, is to essentially replicate that same model towards green financing globally, called the Green Guarantee Company. So alongside the USAID, GCF, FCDO, we essentially sought to replicate the model around offering a financial guarantee proposition in order to mobilize long-term institutional capital towards green initiatives. So I think that's the first. The second, you may have also seen a company that we launched alongside a strategic partner of ours called Carbon Vista. And it essentially seeks to invest in ESG propositions defined broadly, whether it's in reforestation projects, whether it's in renewable energy projects, whether it's in clean cooking projects, essentially any projects that generate high integrity carbon credits that we can then validate, register, and subsequently monetize. And I think thirdly, we also launched, I think 2 weeks ago, a company called Ripple, that's a renewable energy focused proposition that focuses around three things. The first is diesel displacement, the second is franchising, and then the third is around PV manufacturing, so the backward integration around the actual manufacturing of PVs in Nigeria. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Very, very innovative. I like the idea of franchising as a way to aggregate projects. That's a very interesting. Maybe you can just pass the mic to Mrs. Oluranti, and you can either answer the same question or even describe how, given the limited public resources for finance climate action, how does Africa XM help to mobilize funds that will unlock private capital in support of climate action?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone, and it's a pleasure to be at this session discussing this very topical issue of financing climate projects. I'm just going to speak a bit to what they have said, but I'll start with your question first. What have we been doing? I think it's clear to all of us that public funding cannot help us sustain us in being able to deliver on climate projects for the continent, both for mitigation or for adaptation. So it's clear that we must find ways to unlock private capital. And private capital funding would constitute more than 80% of the financing that we will need to, see these projects to reality. So for us at Afrexim we decided to come up with a suite of interventions and instruments. And one of the key instruments we have used or deployed as an organization is the Afrexim Guarantees product. With those guarantee products, what we've done is we've been able to attract private sector investment into renewable projects, green projects on the continent. And the suite of guarantee products cover investment guarantees, country risk guarantees, expropriation guarantees, etc. So this has been one of the instruments we have deployed to be able to attract private sector investment into green energy projects. Another thing we've done is that we've come up with a project preparation facility. Because we realize that a lot of these projects do not even see the light of day or bankability because of struggles in terms of preparing the studies, feasibility studies, technical studies, etc. So we came up with the Afrexim Bank Project Preparation Facility that seeks to support the development of projects that then we can provide debt or equity financing to. And up to date, we've been able to unlock about 2 billion worth of projects in the green and renewable space for the bank and for the continent and our member countries. And so we even went further to see how can we, sort of increase the impact of the project preparation facility, because we know as an institution we cannot work alone. So we identified some partners that we are working with, and we call them local DFIs across our member countries, whom we create joint project preparation facilities with. And for every dollar they put, we match it twice. And we create project preparation facilities that support the development of climate-friendly projects across these countries. We believe that with this, we can scale up and have better impact. We even collaborated with one of the AU agencies out there, NEPAD, to create a 15 million project preparation facility, which will go to climate-friendly infrastructure projects. But apart from this, we also realize that there's need for patient capital to match private capital, either commercial or philanthropic private capital. And so we have recently established the Fund for Export Development in Africa, a subsidiary of the bank that deploys both equity and quasi-equity into climate-friendly projects. And with this, we think we would rightly be matching private sector investors with skin in the game and just not providing the plain vanilla debt facilities. Not that they are not needed, but we believe that the preparatory fund, the equity fund, quasi-equity instruments can assist in unlocking private sector investments in the green energy space and green infrastructure space on the continent. Thank you.
Wow, that's very, very inspiring, because we do know that it takes and, right? So it's going to take a lot of different investment tools to allow us to unlock the flow. And with that, Dr. Dahlia, you guys have been doing an awful lot at the CIB, so please share with us how you're helping to unlock climate finance for projects.
Definitely. Good morning. I'm happy to share the experience of Commercial International Bank, Egypt's largest private sector bank, with you, and to engage with our peers in Africa to see how can we unleash the power of financial institutions to change the African narrative that Tim referred to. And CIB has been genuinely engaged in sustainable finance. We are founding signatories of the Principles for Responsible Banking, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and we had a very positive experience at the peak of the pandemic with the green bond issuance. This experience, or our experience, demonstrates the business case of sustainable finance for a financial institution. It demonstrates that having a proper, robust environmental and social risk management system, you can monetize the environmental and social gain. It proved that we can monetize adaptation and mitigation finance, so that we shift from blended finance, public funding, to commercial and private investments. So just changing the business models to integrate the environmental and social, we were able to commercialize. And that's the pitch. We will never be able to address Africa's climate change crisis and opportunities unless we unleash the power of financial institutions in Africa, unless we shift from the top-down approach for climate dialogue to a bottom-up approach and at scale, grassroots. We have around 700 financial institutions in Africa. And we could witness firsthand, and for the interest of time, I'm not going to delve, that one industry actor could, having the right systems within the bank, we can enact system transformation with our clients and give them environmental green building certification at commercial rates, mind you, at commercial rates. So system change inside the bank triggered system change with our clients and actually started to drive real economy transition. So imagine if you can scale this experience along more than 700 banks in Africa. We have a proof of concepts of successful projects, but we will never address the scale and pace of the climate crisis unless we mainstream sustainable finance across financial institutions and build this supportive infrastructure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If you could just pass the mic to Annika. Sorry, otherwise we have to use these head mics and they're not really easy to use. Annika, 91 has been in this space being innovative. Please share with us some of your learnings.
Thank you. So for those who are unfamiliar, 91 is a global asset manager. We have about 150 billion in assets under management that is raised both in the international market, but also a lot of that is raised on the African continent. So pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. We also invest 58% of our assets in emerging markets. And I think that's important because it's quite a rare position to be in when you are a global investor with local roots and you view emerging markets as a growth vector. And, you know, we invest in debt, we invest in equity, we have a very specific infrastructure portfolio called the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund. It's about a $1.4 billion fund. It has invested in almost 100 projects in 20 countries. We have a 1.1 gigawatt portfolio of renewable power across the continent. And I think that we have learned some very useful lessons from that strategy specifically. And I want to share some of those to make this quite granular and sort of real. That strategy is a blended finance strategy. It's the oldest and largest blended finance strategy in the world. We started off with 300 million in first loss capital from 4 governments. And we were able to raise 1.1 billion on top of that from institutional, European, insurance providers and institutional investors. Now, we would never be able to be where we are today if we did not have that initial first loss. And it is an important lesson because what it has taught us is, to be honest, we might not even need that first loss because the way that we have deployed the capital, the types of projects, we saw 3 amazing projects earlier, those are the types of projects that we invest in. Projects where they have good governance, where they have great ESG practices, where they have, very solid investment returns profiles. And because we do our due diligence, because we have the right skills, because we have boots on the ground and we do the work, our loss ratio over 20 years has been 0.2%. So you need the first loss capital to attract the European investment, but if you do the work properly, you don't need the first loss capital. So what we have seen specifically with those clients in that fund is that it has being in that fund has changed the way they think about investing in Africa. We heard earlier, we need climate investors to come into these projects. I don't think you need climate investors. I think you need long-term institutional capital. You need pension funds. You need sovereign wealth funds. That's where the money is. And we need that money to flow into these types of projects, into our continent to achieve scale. And so when we think about what are the next steps we need to take? The instruments that we just heard about, project preparation, of course you need government guarantees. You do need some first loss mitigation capital. How do you use those instruments to attract the big pools of capital, international pools of capital and domestic, to flow into these types of projects to achieve the scale our 3 project developers want to achieve? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
That's very, very insightful. And I think that as we see, it's not, one type of capital that's going to make these projects move forward. And I really appreciate how you're saying it's building on these different elements and then interacting with the different investors in the market. And then with that, Anais, I will pass it on to you. With Africa 50, how are you looking at this problem and what are some of the solutions that you're finding as beneficial?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to start by commending the work that this platform has done in identifying these projects and organizing this matchmaking with investors. That is extremely important. But I think what this highlights is that many of these projects are looking for risk capital. Capital that has high appetite for risk, that is long-term, patient. And particularly large infrastructure projects do require this sort of capital. These are very risky investments at the very early stage. You need to mobilize millions of dollars, sometimes dozens of millions of dollars, just to get them to the stage where they can be ready for investment by the sorts of investors that we have been mentioning. So, what we always say, and we kind of sound like a broken record perhaps at Africa 50, is that the gap is really there. If we want to have the most impact, that's where we should focus, mobilizing more resources for early stage project developments. So, we do some of that. We have $1 billion in capital at Africa 50 to invest in infrastructure. About 10% of that, $100 million, is specifically dedicated for project development. But honestly, it is a drop in the ocean when you look at the needs. And so, there are other initiatives being led by, other players in this market. We welcome them, but we need to scale it up significantly. And so this is why, as the commissioner earlier mentioned, we've joined forces with the African Development Bank, the African Union, to launch a vehicle that will be dedicated to green investments, dedicated to project development for such investments. So this is a vehicle that will target $400 million. We have $170 million in pledges already that were announced just 2 days ago here by African institutions, by international donors as well. This is a collaborative effort between African institutions leading this. It will raise blended capital. And so what we're trying to do with this is by mobilizing grant concessional financing from the sort of institutions that I just mentioned, we're able to attract commercial capital into project development, which is extremely difficult. Project development returns are not that great. And so, it's difficult to get commercial capital there. And so with this sort of structure, we're hoping to be able to achieve that. We're already having quite a bit of interest. And it is an inclusive effort as well, in the sense that the funds that will be mobilized will be deployed by Africa 50, but also towards emerging developers, particularly local developers that don't necessarily have the full set of skills that are required to get complex projects to completion, but they will be eligible to some of the funding. And some of the funding will also be deployed by large established developers, in large-scale projects. So just wanted to highlight this initiative. And again, we need a lot more funds going into this space to enable us to have enough projects to invest in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So briefly, I'd like to just do kind of a lightning round and just ask each of you if there's one thing that the climate champions and that the UN organizations and that the AU can do to enhance the project pipeline, to enhance the relationship with financiers. What would you recommend that we add to our portfolio for FY24?
No, I think, including all of these early stage risk investors, such as us, such as others that were mentioned before, and advocating, for more capital to go into this. There are lots of announcements being made at this COP, but to be honest, a lot of them are really on paper. And when you look at the details, is it really new capital that is going where it's needed? In most cases, not. There's a lot of communication around this. So we need, real concessional capital going where it's needed, where it can have a real multiplier effect, where there's a lot of risk and commercial capital is not necessarily very comfortable. So that we really need real action around there. Thank you.
Annika?
I think probably a build on what you just said, which is almost mapping the sources and uses of capital for emerging markets, for Africa, for climate infrastructure. There are so many different, we've heard all these different instruments. There are different types of capital that should play a role. Short-term capital that wants a high return, long-term capital that can take an average return. Understanding where those types of capital come in order to scale is so important. And I think the conversation often misses that. Is everybody on this stage plays a role in building the power system at scale. Understanding how we play together and where we play together is so, so important. And it's definitely missing in the market at the moment.
I love that. We're taking notes. And with Dr. Dalia, what should we do?
Adding to my fellow panelists, I think, again, it is unleashing the power of financial institutions. And I disagree upon building our narrative on concessional loans or even public funding. It's not enough. It's like 10% of the global financial system, and it's not delivered. It's not enough for us. So the premise is how to change our business models, which we experienced, and we have a proof of concept. We can even lend commercial rates for desalination water, but because we have the right system, we can monetize the environmental and social gains, and our client is happy. So you see, it's about a fundamental revision of business models of all African financial institutions to be able to entice $379 trillion in the global financial system with no compromise. We should respect the right of investors And now investors look not only for profit, they look for impact because of the ISSB, because of the European Union. So now they need Africa, but we need to deliver them profit, environmental, social governance returns. So please, let us address and target and raise the benchmark to entice private capital. And it is very doable, but we need to have this bottom-up approach and shift from politicizing climate. I mean, it's a zero-sum game right now, nations negotiating. But the business case of sustainable finance, addressing the environmental and social, we need to move the narrative from politics to business case risk return. And it is very doable. Thank you.
Thank you. That data sharing, so we will look forward to those business cases. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of my colleagues have said quite a number of things, but I think one thing we need to focus on is also strengthening partnerships. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and we need to bear that in mind. The kind of funding you need is going to be multifaceted. It's blended financing. You're going to need concessional financing, you're going to need philanthropy financing, commercial financing, and you're going to need quite a bit of intervention from the public sector even. So, but ensuring that we have the right mix of financing is key. Ensuring that we provide the right sort of financing to de-risk some projects are also key. At the initial conceptualization phase, because my institution has been involved in project preparation, I've seen that not one type of financing is enough. In each project you see, especially for most green, renewable adaptation projects, you need a mix. You need concessional funding, you need philanthropy funding, you need commercial funding. Because in fact, if you don't put commercial funding, then the project is at risk of not even working on a commercial and sustainable basis. Because what you also want is sustainability. So my feedback here and what I want to see more of is collaboration amongst all of us. Those of us that can mobilize concessional funding, those of us that are masters of structuring commercial transactions, and those of us that have the technological know-how and play, all of us coming together and being able to solve this puzzle, and our continent needs it. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. And Mr. Amani.
Thank you. Problem with going last, I think it's all been said, but if there are two additional things I would say, it would be finding a way to mobilize long-term local currency into the green space. I think that is extremely important. And secondly, finding a way to proliferate carbon market frameworks to ensure that there's the added juice around the monetization of carbon credits. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much to this panel. Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to introduce His Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin, the UN High-Level Climate Champion for COP27.
Right. Thank you so much, and I'll be very brief. It's an opportunity to share two things. First, a word of thanks for the partners toward this success in building the pipeline of bankable and investable projects. And that had been a great effort that we started while many people were very much skeptical about the ability to do that. But we managed to do it with great success thanks to the partnership, unusual partnership that I was mentioning and emphasizing yesterday, to have the UN system at large with investment bankers, with consultancy firms, and of course with the line ministries and many of the project owners and managers. And I'm happy with the excitement outside. Of course, it gives a good, vibrant background to a world that doesn't really see moments of happiness because of a variety of shocks. But here, this is a moment of happiness for us because these projects are not just a part of business plans, and they are with opportunities to enhance their investments, but basically all of them without exception in the pipeline are with impact. While they are doing well, they are doing good at the same time. The filters to choose these projects were based on SDG filters. And even if some of the project's owners were not realizing that, we managed to identify areas of promotion of these projects by them being part of the impact. Just two things on the next steps. We continue in the GFANZ with the support in continuing this, the pipeline, not just to extend it further, but to enhance the opportunities for investment. What we like to do as well is to use new tools, including from carbon markets, to provide opportunities. We've been approached by a couple of entities with interest in using debt swaps for investment that would require a third party in many cases, which is basically in the case of government. Happy with many of the suggestions that many of you just made now, including the issue on the local currency. I'd like to alert you, and perhaps we'll share more detailed information on the next steps, in addition to the pipeline of investable opportunities and projects, the carbon market and the debt swaps, but getting that into more on the project finance. We are part, as GFANZ Africa, and we are supporting the work at the global level with the Global Capacity Building Coalition, and that can provide lots of technical and assistance, especially in the areas related to the new standards. And this has just been announced a couple of days ago, and it has the who is who in the system, from leading development banks to standard setters to philanthropies, private finance, and the UN system. And you will be finding that there are lots of needs for this capacity development, especially with the new standards when it comes to ESG. I moderated a session yesterday that went forever in about the implications of the integrity framework and the new rules of engagement, including the new standards, and what it means really to announce all of these commitments to the net zero. But this becoming part of the compliance, this becoming part of the regulations, will be impacting more the financial sector at the beginning, so you need to be ready. But your bankers, your financiers are going to link what they are exposed to of these new regulations to the projects as they obtain their loans and finance. There is as well another area of work that we're going to be pushing the work in, which is basically about the acceleration of green industrialization that we're part of, and that will be announced in details on how we get our job in the regional effort to get all of these global initiatives translated, interpreted, and tailored to the needs of the African countries and scale them up. So it's a big effort. I appreciate all of the partners with us, and I thank you and wish you all the success going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. He's humble, but you know, all of this has come out of his initiative to set off these regional forums in order to unlock climate finance. And with his initiative, we've been able to not only unlock climate finance of over 300 million in Africa, but globally, almost 1 billion. So his efforts have been really substantial. We're so grateful for his work over these past 2 years. With his leadership of the UN High-Level Climate Champions team, we've achieved things that I know a lot of people didn't think we could. And this is just the start. So thanks again for coming. Have a great day.